Welcome to Minding My Money Mondays, a common sense talk about money matters. I am your host, Jared Rogers, back for another episode. In the previous episode, we talked about what is money. And in this episode, we're going to talk about what is a budget, but not just any budget. We're going to talk about what an ideal budget looks like. All right, so a budget or spending plan is vital for successful money management, okay? And why? Because it allows you to plan on how to meet your income, manage your expenses, and achieve your personal goals. So for example, if you say this year that you want to make 10% more than you did last year, how are you going to do that? If you say that you wanted to buy a car, a brand new car, or if you wanted to buy a new home, how are you going to do that? How much is that going to cost you? Do you have enough income to meet the needs of having said car or house? Okay. So a budget is a set of guidelines for your income and your expenses. Now, your income doesn't just simply include your salary, okay? That's a component of it. But your income with regards to your budget will include your salary, your investment income, so maybe you have a savings account or a money market account, mutual fund. It will include your passive income. Maybe you are a landlord. Maybe you own a property that you get rent from. And maybe you have retirement income. Maybe you're a retiree, so you have a pension or you have an IRA that you pull money out of. So the budget will look at all of the income items, and it will also look at your expenses, such as saving. And I cannot reiterate this enough or stress this enough. Yes, savings is an expense to you. It's something that should be done, and it is actually like the number one thing that you should have in your budget, okay? Top, number one, in terms of what you spend on first, all right? Housing, transportation, food, personal care, charity, entertainment, and investments. So all of those are the expense items that you would have in your budget. One thing to remember about your budget, or a very important aspect of your budget, is that you want to have a very minimal use, small use of credit because of the high costs associated with financing. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's say you make $10,000 a month, and let's say you spend $11,000 a month. Well, Jared, that's not possible. Well, yes, it is, because that remaining $1,000 either came from savings out of your bank account or it came from credit, okay? But you don't want to spend the $1,000 out of credit. Why? Because it has an interest rate associated with it. Those credit cards, pretty high interest rate, and 22% is really not out of the question. Now, that's an annual rate, and we're going to talk about compound interest and all that stuff later in the series. But if you were paying 22% on $1,000, that means that you have to pay $1,220 on that $1,000, or $220 in interest, okay? So there's a very high cost associated with using credit to help maintain your budget or your expenses. So that's one of the things that you don't want to do or use a lot of. All right, so now that we know what a budget is, what's an ideal budget look like, Jared? Can you give me some numbers? Well, many moons ago, I authored this book, Pathways to Wealth, a common sense guide to personal money management and lifestyle techniques, available on Author House or Amazon or any place in fine bookstores. And in it, there wasn't a chapter, but it was at the end of a chapter on a to-do list in which we talked about budgeting. So instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, I just figured I'd read it to you. Develop a monthly budget. So while this was not covered in the chapter, a budget will help you keep your spending in line and give you a guideline to follow. While it doesn't take a lot to create a budget, it will take discipline to follow it. That's the key. It takes discipline to stay on budget, okay? And when you fall off, that's when bad things happen. You overspend, you burn through savings, or you go into debt, okay? The following ideal budget will give you some guidance. And all the items are listed as a percentage of your monthly income. So the first thing, 10% of your income that you have come in goes to personal savings. Pay yourself first. You always pay yourself first. But Jared, I have to pay my rent. I have to pay my cell phone bill. You pay yourself first. Here's the reason why, okay? As we've recently seen as a result of, COVID-19 and, the impacts of people being furloughed and not being able to work, if you don't have an emergency fund savings, you can find yourself in a very precarious predicament. And if you don't have access to credit or don't have enough credit, then you can find yourself in a really precarious predicament in which you can't pay for certain things. Okay, so always pay yourself first. Plus, as we learn later on in the series, Having savings is building and accumulating wealth. That wealth is something that allows you to make things happen, as well as to pass on to your heirs. So if you have somebody in your family you want to give something to and pass it on, you pass on your wealth and your savings. So this is how generations and people become successful, is because they pass on their wealth. 30 to 35% of your budget will go to housing expenses, utilities, food, and household costs. 15%, no more, will go to installment debt and credit cards. Installment debt being like monthly car loans, anything that you have to pay a monthly note on in your credit cards. 10% will go to transportation and vehicle maintenance. 10% will go to charitable organizations or your church or your mosque or your synagogue or whatever. 5% will go to insurance payments. 5% will go to entertainment and organizational expenses. 5% goes to personal care and clothing. And then 5% goes to investments. That's an ideal budget. The thing to know is that depending on where you live, you might find that your budget, you have to move it around a little bit, because housing was the biggest component, 30 to 35%. It varies. So we're here in Chicago. You're gonna be real hard pressed to spend 30 to 35%, only 30 to 35% on housing in the city of Chicago. Same is true for New York as well as for areas in California, okay? So that's an ideal budget. The challenge for you now is pull out a sheet of paper or get out your smartphone and kind of look at and pull together, those percentages and compare them to what you're actually spending on. You might find that you're within budget. You might find that you're grossly out of line with budget. But that's something that we're going to look at, as we go into this series is, budgeting and how to get your numbers in line. All right, that's it. So a budget is a spending plan. It's vital for successful money management. It allows you to plan on how to meet your income, your expenses, and achieve your personal goals. If you have a question that you would like us to answer, you can send it to questions@makemymoneymakesense.com. That's questions@makemymoneymakesense.com. And we'll do our best to answer it in a future episode. And if you're here on YouTube, go ahead and hit subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. That way you never miss another episode and you never miss another money saving tip. All right, it's been fun. It's been real. Until we meet next time, talk to you soon.